Hello, I'm Michael Cantrell, and you are listening to the Prison Officer Podcast, a place to have a conversation about the forgotten cops that work in this country's jails, prisons, and correctional centers. A place for me to try to make sense of a career spent working inside the fence with some of the greatest people that nobody sees or recognizes for the important job they do to keep this world safe. If you love this podcast, hit the follow button, or better yet, share with your family, friends, or coworkers. In more than 28 years of corrections, I have used or supervised Pepperball hundreds of times. Now, as a master instructor for Pepperball, I teach others about the versatility and effectiveness of this Pepperball system. From cell extractions to disturbances on the rec yard, Pepperball is the first option in my correctional toolbox. One of the most dangerous times for officers is during cell extractions. Pepperball allows officers to respond with the lowest level of force and still be effective and ready if the situation escalates. The responding officer controls where the projectiles are aimed, how many projectiles are launched, and how rapidly they're deployed. This allows the response to be tailored to the moment. To learn more about Pepperball, go to www.pepperball.com or click the link below in the show's information guide. Pepperball is the safer option first. Hello and welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. Today I've got a special guest. I've looked forward to this for a long time. We've never met in person, but I've listened to a bunch of his podcasts. I've read his articles. I've got one of his books here in front of me, and it's Anthony Gangi. He's got 20 years in corrections, started off as an officer. He's moved up to associate administrator and really spends a lot of time trying to teach the people who are coming into this business and to make this business good for those that are in it. He just works really hard, and if you haven't seen his podcast, you need to go over and take a look at Tear Talk. But thank you for coming on here, Anthony.
I am honored, Mike. Thanks for having me. I'm so used to being on video, so I'm smiling and trying to look good, but I'm like, why? It's audio.
Yeah,
so
this is audio.
Thank you for the intro. Yeah, thank you for the intro. I appreciate it.
No, I'm excited. We have a lot in common. We've been doing corrections for the same period of time, just in different areas. But as you know, corrections is corrections, no matter where you're at. And so what I always like to do is I'd like to start at the beginning. Tell me about where you grew up and how you grew up, and if you had any connection to corrections, or if you just fell into it, or how that process happened.
All right, so let's see. So yeah, like most, Mike, I mean, I didn't, it's not something I dreamed to do. I mean, that's not unique. I mean, that's a lot of people here. And by the way, so when I started in 2002, there really wasn't much information out there to research about the profession. So basically what I did was I needed a job. I was a waiter at the time, and, I couldn't just live on tips. So I was looking for a job with benefits and a good salary and vacation days. I mean, that to me was the most important thing, vacation days. So I put in for the civil service test. I put in for municipality, state police, state corrections. And the first spot to call me was my local municipality. At the time, it was Clifton Police. But I decided not to go that route because the max out salary was great, but the initial salary was so low that I couldn't live that way. So DOC, where I work, the state I work in, the initial salary was at the time in 2002 was $40,000. That's what we started off with. The max out wasn't that much. It was like it was like maybe 20 something thousand more, maybe 60,000 if I remember, maybe 63,000 if I remember. But you know what? It was a salary, gave me vacation, gave me benefits. So I jumped right into that. Went into the academy. I was on that first rotation from the test. So literally, I put in for it at the beginning of the year, let's say around March or April, and I was already in the academy by December of that year.
Right.
So it moved. Believe it or not, that's quick movement for. I don't know if a lot of people think that is, but that was. So the academy was about 4 months. We lived there 5 days.
Wow.
Went home on the weekends. So in my state, we're considered law enforcement. The actual title of our COs right now are senior correctional police officers. So
Excellent.
We do have it's pretty cool. I think that should be something that we should work on nationally.
Absolutely.
And basically the training was intense. I love it. Looking back, I love it. at the time. But looking back, it's crazy how you don't know the good moments when you're living them.
That's true. That's true.
So, and then I started my career at a female facility as an officer, and I was there for 2000. Well, I graduated the academy in 2003, so around 2003 to 2011, I strictly worked with only females. I was an officer at the female facility.
Tough job.
Close to. Well, you know what? It's all I knew at the beginning. I had no comparison. And to be honest with you, looking back, there are some differences now that I've worked with men for most of my career now. Because after leaving the female facility, I became a sergeant at a maximum security facility for a few years, and then eventually crossed into administration and went to 2 other facilities after that. And yes, there is a bit of a difference, but to be honest with you, at the end of the day, it's really about just the exchange of respect. I mean, you're always going to have your wild inmates. And when you asked at the beginning, I wanted to mention something. I was watching one of your videos, which is a great video. It's an audio one. And it was about the leadership one you just did. I totally connected to it. One of the things you start talking about it in was purpose. And I want to give some advice for people that are listening to it right now. When I came into this profession, I was externally motivated, as I mentioned. I'm not going to lie to you. It was about benefits and salary. But as you travel through this profession, obviously there are going to be, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, because the stuff you're going to have to deal with, fights, suicides, the mandated overtime. And I learned very quick in my career, very quick. And you actually mentioned a little bit of this in your audio, is that I need to connect to something of value, because the external motivation isn't giving me enough fuel for the energy I'm expending. So I found a way to connect to my service, because corrections really is about service to others. You mentioned that in your video, inmates, the public, our peers, whatever the case may be, there is a greater service. And then what happened was I went from literally a meaningless job to a purposeful career the moment I connected myself to what I do in a healthy way and developed meaning behind the work. And to be honest with you, I'm no longer motivated. I'm inspired. I love this profession. I love the people in it.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I've learned from getting into these podcasts and stuff, I always looked outside of where I was at about the other correctional officers, but I'm really learning about how global it is. Have you noticed that? I mean, you meet correctional officers from all over the world.
Yeah. So that's actually a great point, Mike. I mean, at the end of the day, I think what's happening now is podcasts like yourself, at mine as well. We got, just to name a few guys, Gary York. We got Corruption Behind Bars. He's got a great author, great podcast or YouTube channel. William Young. The list goes on. We have kind of done our best to give them a voice, and they want to embrace that because they haven't had one ever. Right. So now I do start to see more people coming out of the woodwork, and at least when I go to these events, Mike, people actually come up and they're proud and they say, "What do you do for them?" I'm a correctional officer, and that's what they are. They don't say I'm a correctional officer, but one day I want to be this. No, I'm a correctional officer, and that's where I stand, and I love it because they're living in the now and they're loving the moment.
Isn't that great?
Love it.
Yeah, because I know I'm coming in some of the old prisons that I did, Leavenworth and Missouri State Pen. You ran in, as a rookie, you'd run into that old crusty guy that just hated life, that was off in the corner, and he just hated everything. And I was just so scared that I was going to become that person. But like you talked about, find your purpose, find a meaning, find something that makes you get up in the morning, and
Mike, you're right, Mike. You were intentional with your career. The one thing about corrections guys is, if you're passive, it could take the best of you. I mean, you have to be intentional with finding the positive in a negative environment. So again, having that connection, finding purpose is really all an intentional effort. And if you choose that route, and when I say be positive, I'm not talking about changing, the environment. I'm talking about shifting where you're looking, because there is positive things in that environment. Someone goes, well,
yes,
positive, Gant, you telling me to shift my environment? No, look for it.
Right.
But again, it's intentional effort, Mike. That's the key.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Let's talk about a couple of your books. I've read the first one, Inmate Manipulation Decoded. And did working at a female prison that long, did that really give you some insight into inmate manipulation, maybe?
well, you know what's funny? I got that shot. So that book is pretty much about, when did that book come out? 2020. So let's say about 18 years of just insightful experience that basically was more focused on the process than the outcome. I mean, right. One of the things here is that even when they teach manipulation, I found that there was a gap there because most people will tend to focus on the outcome, which leaves the class thinking like, well, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do that. And what they did not do is teach people what leads that to happen. How do good people become corrupted? There was this old mindset where, you got caught up, it was never about you being turned. It was about you were foolish to begin with. And not to minimize, the officers or the staff that do stuff foolish, but I wanted to kind of see the victim mentality and then try to put some onus on the game being played without minimizing the responsibility of the other player. The Inmate Manipulation Decoded is a subtle look at the process of things that motivate us that we may not realize we're doing at that time. So I wrote that book to helpfully protect careers. But I want to mention one other thing. The book is not meant to, the book is not meant to make you afraid of dealing with inmate interactions. A lot of people are like, well, universal precaution means you don't talk to inmates. No, guys, it just means you control the dialogue. So again, the book is really to give you the armor to kind of, go into these dialogues, but the book is not meant to scare you and not have dialogue. I mean, you're going to have interactions.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'd like to read from this one section because it really, I had told other coworkers and rookies and stuff over the years, just learn to say no. Just say no. But you took a moment here, and I love the couple of paragraphs here because it talks about external justification and internal justifications. And I think you just hit it on the head. The external justification leaves room for the manipulative inmate's request to be revisited. Staff members who constantly find themselves using an external source to justify their responses have done nothing to prevent the inmate from challenging the no or directive provided. External responses are considered weak, easily challenged, and does nothing for the staff to prevent the inmate from bringing up the same request again. Internal justifications place the responsibility on the staff member providing the directive. When the directive is given and challenged, the inmate will know it's the staff member saying the directive and, more importantly, believing it. And I think that's just, even with leadership, even dealing with your own staff, don't say, well, I'm doing this because policy says I have to do this. I'm doing this because I believe in it. This is who I am. And you're never going to get, you're not going to get pushback on that. So, yeah, that was one of the parts you really put that in great words there.
I need you for Audible. I need you for Audible. Can I comment on what I thought when I was writing that?
Sure.
So obviously, the external versus internal justification. So technically for me, I always used to find it weak when you had to deliver a directive and then put that directive on somebody else when the inmate went to question it. Now, I'm not saying you have to explain to an inmate why something has to be done. Sometimes you do, out of fairness, if you really feel they don't understand it. But if they're doing it to challenge it, then if you are going to explain, you got to be mindful that if they're looking to challenge you, then you want to step up and take onus to that directive. You don't want to pass that off to someone else because that's weak-minded. Again, like, oh, well, right. You can't eat in the public area. Okay, well, why not? Well, because the sergeant said you can't. Well, what the hell? The sergeant's not there tomorrow. Then the inmate asks again. And the other thing is that you have to be motivated you have to be motivated from what's inside. So basically, I'm giving you a directive that gets challenged. Why? It's because I said so. I mean, that's it. Right. There's no other ifs and buts about it. I said so. It's what I want, and that's what I expect. I'm not even gonna push rules. I'm pushing expectations at first. I'll get to the rules if we have to play that route because the rules are my fail safe. But at the first time, why not? Because it's my expectation. It's what I want. I want carried out. And at the end of the day, if you're not going to do it, then I'm the one that's going to be writing you up or whatever else the consequence would be. And it was funny because a good scenario about that when you mentioned policy. Sometimes people feel that when an inmate questions something, leaning on policy is a great way to justify it. Their mind sometimes could be a little bit different. There was a story in that book about a love note that was given to a female staff member. Now, by the way, she did everything right, turned it in, did what she was supposed to do. When the inmate found out she turned it in, he questioned her as to why. And she says, because it's against the policies and the procedure. And the inmate turned around and said, well, if it wasn't for policy and procedure, then we could be together.
That's exactly the way they think.
But external versus internal. And you know what's funny too, Mike, real quick? So external justification or even justifying why you're doing something right based on external motives. Like, I'm not going to have sex with that inmate because I don't want to go to jail or I don't want to lose my job, whatever it is. Believe it or not, when the inmates start to build that level of trust with you, they can minimize those external consequences to the point where they don't exist. So now when you look at that inmate and you start to trust that inmate and you believe that they're not going to turn you in, well, guess what? The consequence of you losing your job, losing your money, losing your food, whatever, it doesn't exist anymore because you're starting to build a trust for the inmate. So your internal motive is why do you do what you do? Why is it? Because it's the right thing, because that's what I'm here for. That's what I believe in. And that's what makes me want to do my job. And and what's great about that, Mike, is because when it comes to that external external motivations, you're leaving that in the hands of someone else to control. Internal, that's me.
Yep.
So if that's about my job or that's about what I hold dear, that's my core values, I don't put that on the outside for someone to hold. That's for me to hold. And I'll be honest with you, that's a lot harder to get to than me just throwing it out there and hoping that it's strong enough. Because when that stuff doesn't exist anymore, guys, people get corrupted. Yes.
Yeah. And those inmates have spent a lifetime justifying why they didn't have to follow the rules. You know, they wanted the candy bar at the 7-Eleven store. Well, I was born in this bad neighborhood and I don't have enough money, so I just go get it myself. I'll just take it, you know. So rules aren't always something that prevents them from trying to do that. And I think when you show that it's you and this is who I am and this is what I believe, I think you'll see inmates just walk around you. They're not even going to mess with you. They'll go find an easier person to go after. So I'll tell you a little story.
I don't know. I was going to tell you, I love what you said real quick. You said the rules, right? I love what you said because you're 100% correct. Most of the inmates that we deal with, you're right. They're used to not following the rules. That's why at first, as I mentioned before, and I love that you said this, is I lean on expectations first to see if I can get something from them on the inside that they can connect with. And I'm saying, hey, you know what? I expect this from you. And that gives the inmate some level like, yeah, let me see if I can meet that expectation. The rules to me has always been secondary. Because by the way, within my expectations are the rules of the agency, but I want to let the inmate know that you're doing this for you first. And then most likely they'll be willing to comply. But when you start pushing the rules in their mind, it's like, well, what do these rules do for me?
Right.
So I usually save the rules as my final attempt. Like if this expectation isn't working, I know I gave you a fair chance to step up and be the man you got to be or be the woman you got to be. Now you're choosing not to. So now here comes the rules. And when you don't follow it, here comes the automatic consequences that connect to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of along the same lines of what we're talking. And this was later on in my career. I got checked by a female officer. She was walking on the yard, and like inmates will do sometimes, you'll see them, and they were checking her out. This one inmate was checking her out as she walked by. So, of course, I grab him, snag him up, pull him over to the side, and I'm like, dude, you're not going to do that here. We're not going to put up with that. If you do it again, you know, you're going to get sanctions and stuff. And so I see her in the hall later, and I told her, I said, watch out for this guy. You know, he was checking you out, but I took care of it. I pulled him off to the side. And she looked at me and she said, please don't do that anymore. If he does that, I want you to pull me in because I want him to hear it from me that that's who I am, that I don't allow it. And I was like, you know, that makes perfect sense. I kind of did do her an injustice by not letting her be involved in that and showing that this is who I am and that you're not going to do that here. So I learned that later in my career, kind of got checked with that.
No, that's actually phenomenal. I mean, the fact that we do take the protector role, but sometimes we don't realize that, sometimes when we do that, the inmates see that, and then the person themselves may be looked at as vulnerable and weak. So it is good for them to get that chance to step up. But if ever I felt that, like you said, if I had to protect somebody, if I felt at that moment, if I have to step up, I will, but I'm also going to tell that person, hey, next time, this is an effort to empower you. I stepped in immediately because I didn't like where it was going. I gave you a chance to kind of set it straight, but at this point you didn't, so I felt the need to step in. But that's like that saying, teach a man to fish or buy him a fish.
Right.
The protection's great. I'll buy you a fish you eat for a day, but ultimately I got to get you to walk around feeling empowered and, knowing that you cannot be afraid to do what's correct. And that's where teaching the person how to fish holds more weight, because again, when they're alone, the inmates, they're going to see the person as weak as they're always walking around with someone to protect them.
Absolutely.
It's a good topic.
Yeah. Yeah. So another little part in your book here, and this, I guess this is my pet peeve, and you hit on it here. It says, I need him. Be advised, sometimes staff may find themselves in a position where they find they're reliant on an inmate. Reliance and obligation have the same effect on staff in the long run. Staff will lose the level of authority over the inmate. Sometimes an inmate will go above and beyond in the assignments provided to them. The inmate wants to prove to staff that they are not so easily replaced. These type of actions can easily be seen by the inmate, maintenance workers, aides, as well as other inmate porters. Staff may find themselves in need of service and therefore defending the inmate when they do something wrong. Staff will even go as far as justifying in defense and mentioning that they need the inmate because that's the only one who can do the job. My pet peeve, I worked a lot of SEG over the years, and Monday morning you'd come to work and I'd get a phone call from whatever section it was in the prison. Hey, why is my inmate locked up? Your inmate? If you think he's your inmate, we've already got a problem. They're not your inmate. You should be able to take any inmate and a mop bucket and mop a floor. There's not an inmate that's better than the others inside that prison, or you're not the correctional officer you need to be. That's what I used to tell them, and that was always my pet peeve when people would do that. You seen that?
Yeah, I definitely got to have you on my show, Mike. Maybe I have a show coming up tomorrow. We'll figure it out, Mike. You got to email me your phone number because we're in sync. So
okay,
yeah, we're in sync. So you know what's funny? I'll give you an example. Definitely with the porters. I also don't like the name of trustees that's in the book. Because the label, says that the person could be trusted. I don't like the word favor because it puts somebody in that feeling of obligation. But when it comes to the reliance, I mean, we keep having inmates that offer protection to staff, and it's like, really? I have my people for that. And again, it's always about the I do for you, you do for me. And I've seen inmates that have become so good at their job for that reason. And at the end of the day, because facilities are sometimes self-sustaining, and we do have inmate details who are very good at, plumbing and electrician and whatever. And then sometimes we go quick because out of desperation, it's like, we need that inmate. It's like, yeah, but at some point I'd rather pay the vendor because this inmate is in lock right now and they messed up. And now the problem is I'm literally going there begging that inmate for help. And one of the things here is nothing's given for free in this world. Eventually this inmate's going to want something back. And that effort to be reliant on that inmate really gives that inmate a chance to, take control. Guys, when you're reliant on an inmate for whatever it is, even if it's a tiny superficial reason, like the way they clean your area, guys, they're the one that's in control. And they'll be quick to tell you because they start to shift and they're doing their job. That's what they're supposed to do because you gave them the directive. But then they start coming back saying, hey, I'll clean this. I only clean it this way for you, or I'll do you the favor. You can't let them get those words out and say, no, you're cleaning it that way because I told you to clean it that way. Or what favor? You know what? The moment you tell me favor, you're removed. Right. That's a zero tolerance. You're going to tell me favor. I'm the officer giving you the directive. You're removed because that to me is the ultimate sign that you're doing me a favor. So what does that mean later on? I got to do you one? Not happening.
Sure. That's what they're after. I also think that even if they're not getting something in their hand at that moment, I think staff need to be aware that some of those hardest workers, some of those ones that keep your unit clean, that make you look good in front of the administration when they come through and take that walkthrough, they're getting something out of it. And it may be nothing more than the information that they gain from being close and listening to staff in that unit. They're getting something. It may not be in their hand, but they wouldn't do it for nothing.
Well, you know what? I mean, to be honest with you, but you're right. So Reliant, there's also a level of trust that's exchanged, you know, when you're relying on somebody. I mean, yes, it is defined by an action, but when you become reliant, you're trusting that person at a very deep and intimate level. I mean, I'll be honest with you, you know, I'm relying on my peers for having my back. You know, I'm relying on my family. And the reason why I'm relying on them is because I would have no problem doing the same for them if they needed me. You know, so I think there is an exchange of, you know, when I'm relying on somebody, I also put myself in a position that if they ever need me, I'm going to step up and do whatever I can for them because they've done that for me. And I'm not willing to give that to just anyone. So when I ask for help, there's a lot behind that word, because in the effort for me to ask for help, I'm also saying, as you know, as any person should, that I'm willing to do for you one day as well. So I'm not very quick to be relying on an inmate or ask an inmate for help. And there's another thing too. Sometimes a lot of old school, I don't know, I'm sure the practice could still be there. It depends. But let's say you get a rookie that's starting day one and goes right into the unit, and you have a senior officer that pretty much may not be the best worker, maybe a little bit lazy. And then when the officer's like, well, you know, as a rookie, if I need help, who can I call? Oh, you could talk to that inmate right there. They're the senior inmate and they know pretty much how to run the unit. It's like, listen, that's the initial impression that rookie officer is going to have with that senior officer. And then you're already putting that rookie officer in a feeling of obligation towards that inmate, because that rookie right now is confused. They're trying to figure out how to maneuver the job. And a simple ask could be a desperate act for them, because again, they don't know, they're learning. And now you're going to give that over to an inmate who will later on go ahead and ask for a favor in return. Then the rookie does it. And then we never go back to, whoa, how the hell this happened? Because 6 months ago, you gave that officer to that inmate. Handed him over.
Yeah. I was lucky because that was the first 4 hours of my career.
Wait. Say that, what happened?
It was. I went to Missouri State Pen. They put me up on the third walk-in 3 building, and one of the officers said, go up there and run showers. And I said, what does that mean? Old lever halls. You had to rack the levers and stuff. And he said, just ask the walkman. He'll let you know who comes out for showers. Well, 3 hours later, these guys have all closed down their walks because I've had a fight. And all but 3 people are out of their cells on my walk because this guy's been telling me, let this one out, let that one out. And so I learned real quick that I had to be careful of some of the advice I got. But that's exactly what they did to me. The walkman will tell you what to do. And luckily it didn't go well, or I might have kept going with that, you know, but it went bad. So I was like, well, I got to figure out my own way down this.
Well, you know, you're right. I mean, it's a great story you share, because it really is about that first impression, because it sets the foundation. And, you know, if you get someone when they're vulnerable and you tell them it's okay to do that, then when they make that, you know, a foundational behavior, and they keep on doing it, then it's like, yeah, but you guys started the person off wrong. You know, you told them at one point that the inmate will be more available to them than you. You know, and that to me has been unacceptable to me since even when I first started this career, because it happened to me. And I even knew right at the beginning that this didn't feel right, because it just put me in such an awkward position. Because the academy, I'm not going to say I was taught an us versus them, but I was taught that I was in a position of authority. And when I was desperate for information, going to an inmate to gather that information, I felt made me less in that position of authority, and it lifted the inmate up. And right off the bat, knowing enough to recognize that was wrong would be me going back to that officer and saying, hey, listen, if you don't want to help me, can you find me another officer that will? That's all I'm asking, because I'm not going to go to an inmate. Well, they're here all the time. It doesn't matter, guys. I don't want to go to an inmate for personal reasons. I don't want to be vulnerable to an inmate. I don't want to tell an inmate I don't know something at the beginning of my career. I want the inmate to know that if I don't know something, you guys are all here supporting me. And the good thing about that is that I go on the strength of my team, which means that I'm never alone. You got me being alone.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
so if we all go at this together, there's nothing I won't know because you'll have my back, and the inmates need to see that. And all you showed them today was you're willing to pass me off, and then wonder later on in my career, later on when I'm too close to the inmates. Well, you know why? Because you made me too close to the inmates. You told me that was my resource.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't
It
ever
happens,
separate
sadly.
any of them from us. You know, when they get cut from that herd, that's when it's dangerous, you know. So I'm curious, you went to a 4-month academy. So how much of that was police officer stuff? How much of it was corrections? That's because I went through the Bureau of Prisons is a 3-week academy. Missouri Department of Corrections was, I believe, 3. I talked to a guy the other day who was putting officers in the jail after a day and a half because they're not spending the money on a training and stuff. So tell me about a 4-month academy. What all did you get out of that? What did you think about that?
Yeah, it was. I loved it. So again, it is stressful at the moment. I've never been through something as intense as that before. And by the way, the system I'm in now has only evolved. I mean, you can go to YouTube right now and look up videos. Well, at this point, I could just tell you, the New Jersey Department of Correction has great videos on academy training. We have a great PIO who really shows you what type of stuff we do in the academy. So I started the academy December 2nd of 2002, and I graduated the academy probably, I think, if I remember correctly, March 19th of 2003. So again, you know, it's intense because you're living there Monday through Friday, and then Friday night you go home. You're good for the weekends, and you got to be back Monday morning early. I mean, early. You got to be back. I remember having to be on the road by 3 a.m. to get there by 4 or 5. But so basically, a big part of it is really, I think the academy is about cultivating and not changing individuals. I think the people that, if the academy is forced to change people, a lot of people aren't really going to make their way through. I think that they find a spark in somebody and they find a way to cultivate that. I also believe that they like to put an us versus them mentality between us and the instructors. So we together, we could form a tighter group because again, in the wall, that's all we have is each other.
Right.
So they want us to connect. So they wind up being the enemy at first. Then eventually it lessens. But basically a lot of the stuff we got was, you know, well, let me get rid of the obvious. We got the firearms training, all that. The MMA, you know, the mixed martial arts, the OC, you know, the tactical stuff, definitely is going to be a big portion of that. You know, because a lot of people haven't, you know, shot a gun before, haven't been sprayed in the face with OC. So, you know, it gets introduced and you get, you know, trained. And by the way, there are zero tolerances, certain things. You can't pass the range. You can't pass the academy. You know, I mean, there's certain things that, there are going to be zero tolerance for. There is going to be the PT. I mean, literally you are PTing every day, and every other day you were running minimal 1.5 miles, but most of the time it could have been 3 to 5 to prepare you for that 1.5 mile run. We were lucky we were on the beach, but I was also in the dead of winter. So, you know, we got lucky because most of our training when I went was done on the inside because it was a little cold to go on the outside. But it was funny when we messed up on overnight, it wasn't too cold to put us in that leaning push-up, you know, for leaving a candy bar wrapper in the sink. We get a lot of training on criminal codes like the 10A of corrections, you know, to understand, you know, the policies and procedures, the generalized policies and procedures that govern each facility. You know, we also go into interpersonal communication training, you know, training that kind of helps us relate to having that position of authority and then dealing with people that may be a little bit resistant to that. You know, we cover everything from, we also did training when I did it. I don't know if they still do this now, but we would switch roles and be an inmate to kind of know what it feels like to be on the other side of that officer. We would also do a lot of mock training, like, you know, pretending we're inmates on a dorm and then the officers got to patrol the dorm. So a lot of good, what do you call it? Scenario based training.
Role-based.
And then there was a lot of classroom, but again, your day would start off with the PT, but I would say the trainings for the classroom was mostly, a lot of it was based on the laws. That's a big part of of New Jersey Criminal Code. We have a lot of laws that you have to know, you have to memorize, you have to have an understanding, and also of why that law exists. That's a big thing, because one thing about the state I work in is they expect a lot from us as officers, because we are regulating the rules. And when we make a decision, they expect us to be able to justify that decision through the why of why that decision needed to be made, because it's easy to train people the what, the how, but the why is really what matters. If you know the why will truly save your career. When writing, report writing was a big thing. Literally, you are learning how to write something in a manner that everybody can read and understand, because at any point that stuff could be taken to the highest level. Radio codes, incident commands, basically if stuff was happening inside the facility, how does it work when, you have to have an incident command set up. We also did, we would have like the investigators come in, talk about their job and what they expect of us. So we're working in a good partnership. So we're trained on crime scene management, a bunch of things that basically relate to the needs of the other departments that will be working in the house. So we do have interactions with a lot of civilian staff. So they'll introduce themselves and talk about, what it is that they have to do, and then how we play a part in that. And, it really is everything. We're trained on everything, but actually they shifted a little bit because of our rovers. But when I went to the academy, we weren't trained on pulling people over. Now they have introduced that training to us. So our officers are trained, especially our rover officers are trained on pulling people over so it can be done safely. Because as a rover, obviously you are going to be pulling people over, going to the vehicle, and you got to make sure that the officers are safe. So we're very on par with what the police get. They say sometimes the only difference that we have is at the time they would have that Title 39, which is the pulling over, which we do have a section of that. And they get trained on domestic, which technically everything we do in the prison system is domestic. So other than that, we're pretty much trained almost parallel. Actually, our academies actually also teach the state police on riot control, MMA.
Right.
Yeah, we're pretty Jersey's pretty advanced when it comes to training. Yeah,
that's probably the best.
It's a good
academy program I've ever heard. That's amazing. That's great.
Well, as I said, you could check the video. There's a video on YouTube. If you get a chance, you could check it out. Just put NJDOC Training Academy. It's a few years old, but it'll give you a taste of what they do. But it's a very good. It's a good academy, man. It is.
Right. Yeah. So you started off as an officer, and you did that for, what'd you say, several years? 11?
Yeah. I was an officer so I graduated the academy started in 2002, graduated the academy in 2003. So I went from correctional officer recruit to, correctional officer trainee to correctional officer recruit. So I was a COR for a year. And then I was a SCO, a senior correctional officer, for about 7, because I left my first facility to become a sergeant in 2011. So, 2004 I became an SCO, and then a sergeant after that.
So what was that spark that made you want to go up through the ranks to move on up and take those leadership positions?
Good point. And by the way, you guys get a chance, you got to check out his audio on leadership. It's a real good video, audio that you put up. I think it's the last one you put up. I enjoyed it. That was the one I was listening to before we got here as well. Yeah, it's a very good episode. Okay, so for me at first, to be honest with you, there were certain people that were getting moved up that I just said, you know what, I may not want them to be my boss. So my incentive wasn't correct at first. It wasn't. But having said that, it was a position I grew into and I learned to love. So eventually I will tell you this, because it definitely wasn't about the raise, because it really wasn't that much of a bump. But when I became the supervisor, there was such a connection I had with my people. Because you know what's funny is, when you're an officer, you're definitely accountable to each other. But when you become a supervisor, you're responsible for that person. Yes. And I think there's a level of difference with that, that I really enjoyed Well, on the tactical side, so basically, I would consider a sergeant the tactical side of supervisory before we start getting to the administrative or the strategic side that you was mentioned in your video, because you're that one layer removed. So as a sergeant, you have that close connection to your people. You have that level of responsibility, and I think you just develop a very healthy family where we're all working together to do what we can that's best for the agency, best for the team, and in the end. There's a reward behind that because I think, to be honest with you, you know what's funny? Now that you asked that question,
What's that?
I think, to be honest with you, because this is just came to the top of my head right now since you asked that, because you got me thinking real quick. I think, to be honest with you, when I became a supervisor and I had that responsibility and I started seeing successes, and when I mean successes, the people I'm leading are stepping up and becoming the best that they can be. I started feeling fulfilled. This goes way beyond being happy about a job, guys. This is really being fulfilled about the why something is happening. And I felt fulfilled by seeing other people step up into their potential and be successful. So I think being a supervisor gave me a chance to really step into that service of others and really embrace the role of what it takes to be a leader and be responsible for the people in your charge. So fulfillment 100% is what I grew into.
Yeah. And I think people shouldn't expect, as they move up through the ranks, that your purpose, like we talked about earlier, that your purpose is going to remain the same, because it's not. You're going to find and have to find new purposes as you get farther up that rank structure. Because I know you said you were sergeant. I think lieutenant is probably kind of comparable in the Bureau of Prisons. And that was the greatest time. I mean, it's you and, like you said, your family, your team, your shift. You're leading them. You're there with them. They care about you. You care about them. And then you take that step over. And now I started getting pushed away from, my custody family. And here I am with administration on this side and custody on this side. And I was a little bit caught in the middle. And I had to find new purpose there. And it did become, like you said, that mentorship. I found where I had the ability to help people who needed that step up. And so I really got engaged in doing that. And of course, that was about the time I went to Thompson, opened up that new prison. So I got to get my feet just in there and train. We trained every day with rookies, and that was very fulfilling for me. But I do think you have to be there and understand that your purpose is going to change as you go through this career. So
that's powerful, Mike, because when you're in the middle, let's say middle management, I would start looking at lieutenants as the introductory to administrative level. So I would see them as middle managers, to be honest with you. Even though sometimes they could step down into that tactical role, for the most part, they usually are once removed. I always say that you have to speak 3 languages when you're middle management. You have to speak the strategic side of what's being, passed down, right?
Yep. The vision.
And then for our level, the vision, if you will, and then our level is filtering that to operations. How do I filter what they want to our operations? And then the tactical side being the officers and the sergeants. So technically, it's more of the agency giving me the what, and then me pushing the how down to my people. And then I'll go back and explain the why it has to be done, because you don't want to micromanage the how. That's for your people to discover, and then we work it out, but let them be invested, because they have to discover that, guys. I mean, you can't, when you get given what, you really got to give it to your people, sit down, have a dialogue, and get them invested in it, because then when it's successful, they're going to be a part of that. They're going to want to be a part of that. And I think as middle management, I actually did a video on this. We get caught up in that translation. And I believe that people that know how to translate those 3 languages survive, because what they can do is they can pass the wants of the upper level and they are, down, and they can float the needs of the front line up. And look what I just said, guys, wants coming down, needs going up. And the hardest part of that is that, believe it or not, top-down communication is pretty much natural. It's the bottom-up communication that's intentional. And we have to do what we can to help that front line bring that voice upwards. And if we're not speaking their language, then the message is not going to be heard, because it's up to me at that point as a middle person to take what they need and translate that here to a point where they understand it.
Excellent.
And vice versa. And you know what the best part about it all is? Part of that translation, remember this word is, as again, I'm always going to go back to it, why? Why does this have to be done this way? And then why do you need these resources? You know, and that helps out with the translation.
Absolutely. So let me change direction here just a little bit. You know, I've watched some of your, or a lot of your Tier Talk for years, and you have passion. You have passion for training. You have passion for the staff and the people that you're talking to on that podcast. Kind of walk me through, how did you get started with Tier Talk? What made you start doing that, and tell me from the beginning on how it kind of started and how it grew, because I told you all ago, I think you're probably the father of correctional podcast, because you've been doing it for a while, and it's very successful. So tell me a little bit about how you got. I appreciate
that. And by the way Mike weighs success is by how people take the message, and that's what matters. It's not about the numbers; it's about just getting to that one person. Because every time I do a show, I'm speaking only to one person, and then you never see that. It's crazy how much people. It's crazy how much people relate to that, you know, message. I don't try to real quick. I don't try to fit what everybody wants to hear, because at the end of the day, you'll never be consistent with a message. So you stay true to what it is, and you bring the people to the message, if you will. So for me, I here's the funny thing. So corrections has guys, I've been through it too. I remember being bastardized because of being in this profession and people not understanding it. Now, again, guys, this was back in the early 2000s. And I think Mike had mentioned this in one of his episodes. I think it's the leadership episode, where I think it's okay for us to connect to our job. I know a lot of people, you know, may think differently, but guys, we do it for such a big portion of the day, or in some cases with officers now, they're mandated so much. So the point is, I don't want to hate that much of my life, but I also want to maintain a balance. You know, I get that, but that doesn't mean that I have to hate one thing and love the other. That balance doesn't have to be on extremes of, you know, my job, my home life becomes an escape because my life is miserable at the job. Guys, I'm not going to, I don't think that should be that way. So when I started realizing that I was connecting to this job, and when people were, you know, bad-mouthing what we do with very minimal understanding of why we do the things, because that's the key. When they bad-mouth or bastardize this possession, they go on the what, and then when we try to explain the why, they don't want to hear it, and they'll always go back to the what, and it's like, you know what, this is bullshit. So I started to feel a certain way where I chose this profession. I have value in this profession. So at one point, yes, I went there because there was benefits, right? But I learned to love this profession to the point where my connection to this profession, I didn't feel trapped. I felt like I chose it. I felt like I never settled. So when you're attacking me, I have to stand up and defend it, because this is what we do. This is who we are to some extent. And yes, I'm going to say it, guys, because I've been very healthy in how I manage my profession and my home life. So I'm okay with saying this is who I am, because it hasn't changed. Because you know what? I define my position, because when I came into corrections, my core values never changed. And I found a way to connect my core values to the expectation of the agency. I connected to the vision on my terms, but still within the parameters of what was expected of me as a trusted professional. So now, with that said, I was a toll collector. Go figure. Like, who the hell are you pointing the finger at? But toll collect. Yeah, sorry, just thinking about it right now. Man, you got me, pissed off. No, so yeah, so the toll collector. I like to chat with people, so I don't even do Easy Pass. I pay tolls. I want to interact with people, say hi, and keep moving. And he knew I worked for where I worked because, I'm in uniform as I'm driving through the tolls.
Right.
And I remember him saying something bad about working at the female facility because something had hit the news, and he just, jail guards. I don't know why you would choose this. And I'm like, really? I didn't have time to really go into a pedestal moment there.
Right.
But it got to me. So I said, you know what? And it was this big thing where he kept on saying guards. And I don't know, it was the context of how it was being utilized that made me think like, I get we have a connection to that word. Hear me out. I get that. But it was the context. And in order for me to defend the context, I'm like, this guy has no idea what we do. I know he's saying the word guard because he sees us in a primitive way. And I know what we do. So I wind up writing an article for Corrections One called, Yes, Corrections Officers Are Law Enforcement. And the article went viral. It was just a timely article. Guys, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of views, shares, and it was a very popular article, very well received. And I started getting these crazy emails about how timely that article was. And then what happened was there was a law enforcement magazine that one of the editors had saw the article. And what she did was, because I published it on LinkedIn, I think. And also Corrections One, obviously, but it was also published on LinkedIn as well. I did it separately. And what happened was the person saw the article and then she asked if I would like to work for the magazine because they wanted to give corrections a spotlight in that. And which was great. Yeah, it was cool. I jumped on the magazine. I worked for the magazine for a little bit. I want to say this was around 2011, 2012. So maybe about 11 years ago, because I know I had just became a sergeant at the time. So I started writing for the magazine monthly and I was giving out articles monthly. You know, I was loving it. And then I had the idea because when I went to discuss every month, we would meet and discuss what plans we had for the next month's article. I looked in the distance and they also had a radio studio there. At the time, it was iTunes Radio, I think, or TuneIn Radio. And the guy had a studio. This guy had some money. He had everything set up nicely. And I really could not take my eyes off that. I actually would stay afterwards to see, at the time, a friend of mine who was actually writing for us, but actually was given a spot. She was doing a show. Sure. It's sad that we're no longer friends now, but we were friends at the time. And I remember telling my wife, I want to do that. I said, I think I could do a very successful show on this guy's platform. Not knowing, remember, this is 2012. TuneIn, all this stuff was new. Internet radio, all this stuff was really new. Sure. So what I did was, it was around, it's definitely around 2011, 2012, because I remember being winter and I was shopping at a jewelry store with my wife. I forget what we were looking for, but I remember having this impulse in the middle of shopping while she was looking at something. And I said, you know what? I'm going to put a suggestion into this guy that owns the magazine to see if I can go ahead and use that station and do a show once a week. So I first name that came to my mind for some reason was Tier Talk. It's never changed. It's always been that. It was the first thing that came to my mind. And I gave a summary of what I would like to do. And basically what I wanted to do at first was look up correctional authors, get their books, bring them on, take some of their audience, by the way. So there was a little bit of a motive behind that, but to go ahead and listen to their thoughts, talk about their books, and, see if I could be, if they'll give me a show based on that at first. Sure. So when he messaged me back, he basically, kind of challenges some of the thoughts I had. So I had to defend it. And after I defended, he said, yeah, we'll give you a shot. We'll give it a shot. We'll do it. Whatever, every Saturday. I think it was done at 6:00. We did. It wasn't live. It was done on Saturday. I forget when it aired, but it aired sometime during the week. But it was pre-recorded. Very, very rarely did we ever go live. Sure. So what happened was, I remember my first guest actually was Gary Cornelius. He's the author of The Art of the Con, a bunch of other correctional books. And it was the first time I met him, and I was just I'm still in awe by him. For me, he was, I'm sure there were before, but for me, he was the first author that had worked corrections that I read. So I was very connected to what he was doing. He was teaching. I felt him. And then just real quick, the second was, I believe, either way, the first 4 shows, I had Gary York. And if you watch Tear Talk, Russ Hamilton was on within the first couple of shows. So that's how far back me and Russ go, by the way, because Russ is on my show a lot, if you're familiar with Tear Talk.
Right.
He's a retired sergeant out of California Department of Corrections. So what happened was, I'm doing the show regularly, and doing well, and then I get a phone call from CNN because they had the escape at Dannemora. And when they had the escape at Dannemora, I was given a call to see if I can go on the show. And I was so excited. And then what happened, if I may, is that once those interviews did well, unfortunately, I had a falling out with the owner of the radio station. And basically, I had to make a choice of whether I wanted to comply with something that they wanted me to do or not comply. And I chose not to comply with what it is that they wanted me to do. I told them that I did not want to comply with what it is that they wanted me to do. And then eventually I had to separate from them. And now, mind you, this is around 2015 now. So I was with this radio for a few years now because I was on CNN June of 2015 during those escapes. So I went home and I was upset because I thought I lost everything because the radio thing became such a big part of my life. I mean, when I tell you I did that show for about 3 years with them, I don't think I ever had one repeated show. And I went home, I was very upset. And I remember my wife telling me, you could just do this on YouTube. You know, mind you, I don't know, just not something that came to my mind that day. A lot different than today, but in 2015, I didn't think it. And lo and behold, after a few attempts, we just started gaining the momentum on the YouTube channel. And at this point now, mind you, we're within a niche, but I've earned every subscriber. I don't have any viral videos. I mean, I think the biggest video I have, it's over 200-something thousand views, but it's about a falling of an officer. So I don't get a lot of the traffic because it's not correctional related. But with that said, I have been able to have about 33-something thousand followers on Facebook, another going to be 22,000 followers on YouTube, which is the main platform. And I speak at conferences. I already have stuff coming up next year, private planes that take me to different areas of the country, if not the world. And one of my biggest accomplishments recently was being the keynote speaker at the American Jail Association and being told that however many years, 30 or 40 years, however long they've been doing it, I was the first ever prison person to keynote a jail conference. I didn't know that prisons and jails have a little bit of a divide. And then obviously the author of both the books, Inmate Manipulation Decoded. And then you have the other book right now called My Journey from Officer to Administration, which to me are two also the great accomplishments. Because when you write a book, you're going to interact with people that, you may never meet. And then the great thing is, guys, when you make this difference and you go to the conferences, people relate to you. They relate to the videos, they relate to the book, and you feel that you're having an impact. And one last thing, Mike, is that this to me matters, guys. And if I may say something, I think this will carry a lot of weight, is that I never looked to impress anyone. I've always looked to make an impact. And when you want to make an impact really is about walking next to somebody and helping them navigate through this profession. And I figure I have done that personally with people, but through my books, I have also been able to put out my hand and give the life lessons that I have learned in the hopes that people don't have to go through maybe some of the things that I've went through. So I think overall I've done pretty well. And you mentioned before, Mike, about mentoring. Mentoring is key because it's a developed relationship between two people that trust each other. And I think, for me, mentoring has been one of the greatest values because I'm given the chance to help somebody navigate through this profession. I mean, that's key. Yep. But then I'm also given the chance to share my experiences, share my stories. And I think there's such value behind that. And for people that don't realize the value behind mentoring somebody, I mean, really being invested in someone's career and sharing your story. And on the other end, to be next to someone and to share in those experiences. That's why, again, when you're first coming into this profession, you need to listen because these senior officers or these senior staff, they have stories to tell that have tremendous value. And if you don't listen to those stories, you're missing out on advice that can not only save your career, by the way, but advice that's disappearing.
Right.
Senior staff are leaving. And the sad thing is, if we're not listening to those old school methods, the core value that's behind the lessons that we're learning every day. Because I always tell people, even though corrections is evolving, we're not really straying that far from core values.
Right.
And sometimes we need the reminder of that from the people that have walked the walk for so many years.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very good, good mindset to have when it comes to being a mentor.
Absolutely. A good communicator and a good officer were just as good 50 years ago as they are today. So yeah, wow, great information. And I want to thank you for being on the program. What kind of stuff are you up to now? What's coming up next?
All right. So I have conference-wise, I'll be out with Montana with a few of the Tier Talk crew people. We're going to be doing a conference out there. The book Inmate Manipulation Decoded is used in their training out there. They're very supportive of what we do. So I want to definitely go out there and meet the troops. I have a couple of things happening at the beginning of the year. But again, I'm still on the job, guys, so I don't have all this vacation time. So I have to be very strategic. And then I'm actually working on my next book right now, which is just more of, I don't know. It's more of like insight, but what I'm going to do with this book is that I like to get input. All my books, you'll notice, have input from people in the profession. Inmate Manipulation Decoded at the very beginning will have a quote from someone from the profession. The most recent book, My Journey from Officer to Admin, it's a passage from me, but then every passage has a quote from like 159 different professionals throughout the book. And then there's also a chance for you to write yourself. This one right here, I'm going to do something a little bit differently. I started writing the first chapter now. I'm going to set the chapter up. Let's say the first chapter I think is about knowing yourself and how to connect that to the profession. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out my premise. So maybe about, let's say 1,500 words of what I feel is going to set up the context and something personal for me. And then I'm going to go ahead and let someone from the profession read that. And if they can relate to that story, then they will submit me their story and then I will fix it up and put it in and that will complete the chapter. So the context and then someone from the profession sharing it. Like for the first chapter, again, it's about finding purpose and connection. And then the person that's going to add a story to that first chapter is going to be William Young.
Oh, great. Yeah, I love, one of the things I like doing with my podcast, for years, growing up in corrections, you'd hear those old timers say, if I'd have wrote it down, I'd have a book. Well, they never did. So any of those stories that we can collect, that people could pass on, like you talked about earlier, that's such valuable information, so great that you're doing that. I'm looking forward to seeing that. So tell me where people can get a hold of you.
Well, you got the Tier Talk YouTube channel. I pretty much respond to every comment that comes through the page or the YouTube channel. And then Facebook, I'm all over Facebook. I have a profile page. Even though we're maxed out, I can't take any more friends. People can still follow. And then I comment pretty much anybody that messages me on Facebook or email. Gangi, Gangi, Anthony@yahoo.com.
Excellent. Like I said, I've been excited about doing this, excited about meeting you and getting to talk to you. So I hope we can do this again, and maybe on this next book, we'll sit down and have a talk.
Yeah, and I'll have you on my show.
Okay, that sounds good.
Thank you so much, for having me. I'm honored, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, you have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too, sir. Bye.
If you enjoy these podcasts, the best way to support the Prisoner Officer Podcast is to share these episodes with your friends or family on social media. Let me invite you to visit www.theprisonofficer.com. If you haven't already, check out the Prison Officer Podcast on Facebook and click that little follow button. Or leave us a message, or better yet, leave us a review. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcast, Google, or Spotify, please click the subscribe button. Until next time, I'm Mike Cantrell. Watch your back, and please take care of each other out there behind those walls.